Hey, good day, fellow deal makers. Josh here. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a panel discussion with about multifamily investing with two different GPs. So we'll understand a little bit about what it looks like to be a GP in multifamily investing, and what's it look like to bring two different groups together to collaborate on a project. So on today's show, we have Mark and Josh, and then I'm your host, Josh Wilson. So let's do this. Let's do a 2-minute quick introduction about yourself. Let's start with you, Mark. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you currently focused on?
Sure. I'm Mark Schuler. I'm based in Seattle, Washington. I've been a practicing architect up here for the last 35 years. I've done literally hundreds of buildings around the Puget Sound and all over the country. And about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that, I got very interested in the deal making side of real estate. As an architect, I get dragged into a design and entitlement exercise well into the process of a deal that's underway. And I was always curious about kind of that deal making side, which I never really saw just in the design and engineering world. So I know back in 2001, 2002, I went to the University of Washington, got an advanced degree in commercial real estate development, and took me a few years, but started doing deals probably around 2013 or 14, and I've done 10 or 12 apartment syndications along that time. Done a number of them with Josh Welch, and I'll hand it off to him now.
Cool. So Mark, thank you for sharing. From architect to deal maker, that's super interesting. We'll dive into some of the challenges and some of the extra value you bring because of your background there. Josh Welch, kind of give us an idea about who you are and what are you focused on?
Sure. So I'm Josh Welch. I am the founder and CEO of Three Pillars Capital Group. We're a private equity multifamily company down here in Houston, Texas. We're primarily based out of Houston. I've always been a real estate junkie, so to speak. I have an engineering background. And, when I started out in real estate, it was really on the single family side. So I had a lot of single family rentals at the time. They were in Florida, and kind of scaled that to a level where I wanted to scale faster and kind of grow something bigger. But, there's kind of a glass ceiling there, single family. And so I kind of just figured out that, hey, why don't I just buy an apartment building that's 100 units? It's like buying 100 houses, right? So not quite the same, but that's kind of what triggered my, interest and desire to kind of switch into that side of the business. And so, we formed Three Pillars Capital about almost 5 years ago now in 2017, and our goal really is on finding undervalued assets, things that have been mismanaged, in communities that are also underserved. And so we see that there's a huge demand and the need to create good quality product for the working class folk. And so that's what we really focus on, is really how do we make that product better, not just take the same formula of repainting and changing out the carpets or just marginally increasing the quality of the apartments, but actually really doing a bang up job. So it's a place that people really love to call home and want to be there. So that's our focus.
Awesome. Josh, thanks for sharing. So one of the things I like to do when I'm on doing an interview and having a discussion like this is I like to get a little, personal and kind of learn a little bit about people's backgrounds and ask some questions around there. So for both of you, I see you both attended University of Michigan.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
So I guess that's your alma mater. That's where you guys have your allegiance to. But you guys did it at different times in life, and then you guys landed in different places, right? So we have Mark, where are you located, Mark?
I'm in Seattle.
Got it. And then Josh, where are you? You're in Houston, right?
Yep. Houston.
Awesome. Okay. So with this question, you guys, went to school, Go Blue, right? That's my brother-in-law school. You guys went to school there, and then you guys went your separate ways. Now, if we went back to school, and let's just say we're all going back to school at the same time, and I asked you when you were in college, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Other than, drinking and partying and such like that. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Josh, if I asked you that question, what would you have said in college?
I just, again, I was a very linear type of a thinker back then. So, some senior level director and engineering. I mean, at the time I was working in defense contracting for a pretty large government contractor. So again, I kind of developed the ability to think a little bit more outside the box and realize that life is pretty much anything you make of it. So at the time I would have just said some senior level director position.
Okay. And then Mark, I asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
Well, I was one of those nerdy idiot savants when I was a kid, and I literally figured out I wanted to be an architect when I was about 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
And, I have a almost autistic quality to me where I hyper focus on a goal, and I am pretty hard pressed to be knocked off that direction. So I stayed focused on architecture for a long time, although I started my college career in engineering. And Josh and I were both at the same, we went to the same engineering program, but different times. Quickly learned that, my interests were much broader than the curriculum offered by U of M's engineering program. So I switched over to arts and sciences for a minute, did my prerequisites for architecture school, and then have a minor in architectural history, if you can believe that, and then switched and applied to and got into architecture school at U of M.
Yeah.
Did my undergraduate career there, moved to Seattle, and have been practicing here for since 1989. And it wasn't until later in life when I really started seeing, when I was taking on developer projects, big apartment buildings, 200 units. I was designing and engineering on this. Like, I'm really interested in what you're doing because you're making a lot more money than I am. So that's, it took me a minute, but I pivoted, and it was a hard pivot. I mean, I'm really hardwired in a certain way, and I had to stretch and grow myself to adapt to this new role that I'm now in. I'm glad I did. So
very cool. So Mark, let me ask you a question, right? So you guys went to school, same school, just different times, same program, different times. You said kind of switching from this role, you're doing designs and blueprints, and you're doing all this work on the architectural side, and you saw people like Josh who are doing this. Like, what was the biggest chasm, right, of switching over or evolving into that you experienced, going from architecture, a doer, right, to a developer, investor? What was the hardest thing for you?
Yeah, it was actually very hard. Maybe not for other people, it was for me. I think the biggest thing is two things. One is you adopt a different mindset. I have a unique ability, and my skill sets allow me to kind of look at a building from a lot of different angles. So I can look at it from design, engineering, planning, legal point of view, but now I'm on the deal making side. So I'm sizing it up for the return potential. And, can I get investors interested in a deal that, might be a value add deal on this particular project? So it took me a lot of years to flesh out all the nuances of the development game. You learn that every day. I mean, there's not a day in this business that goes by that I don't learn something new. But there's just a certain amount of base knowledge I had to build up. And as I built that knowledge up, I got a lot more comfortable on the road. And now, I mean, I'm doing deals all the time. And yeah, there's always stuff I don't know and I need to learn, but I'm just have a lot more confidence in my ability to solve problems as I need to on the fly. So
cool. Josh, explain to us. So, you're in private equity, you've been in syndication, background working in defense contracting, and, you're looking at these kind of deals now. I'm looking at your LinkedIn. It says 300 million plus in AUM, assets under management, right? So you've learned a lot. You have a really cool, working experience. Explain to us, the listeners, what is, when, we're talking about GPing a deal and syndicating a deal, what do those terms mean, and how do you, leverage those to put these kind of deals together?
Right. So, the term GP, general partner, what it stands for, it's really, they're the lead, they're the leaders of the deal, right? They're the ones that are finding the deal. They're figuring out how to raise the money for it. They're putting together the business plan. And oftentimes it's not just done by one person or one company. Most often we find that, a team effort really helps get these deals across the finish line. And, equity raising is a big part of that. It's a lot of, we just did a deal that was, around $40 million and, raised about 15 million, something like that. And, we have a pretty expansive equity network to do that, but, sometimes we'll bring in other folks that kind of participate in that. And they also bring their skill sets alongside of it. Mark's an architect, so he helps a lot with, some of the, if a foundation work or anything like that, he definitely comes in and kind of gives his 2 cents. But, it's really, it sounds like it's an easy title to achieve, but it's not. It takes a lot of, it's like producing a movie. You gotta be the guy putting everything together. So you're really quarterbacking the entire deal. And, if there's no playbook for it, everybody's got a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
We happen to find a way that works really well for us. Our company is vertically integrated. So for us, we do the property management in-house as well. So, not only are we focused on the acquisition side of it, putting the business plan together, raising the money, but, we're also thinking about how do we run this thing and make sure that it's making money, on the ground level, from collecting to eviction to leasing, all that stuff. So we kind of we look at the big picture, and then we really drill down into the details. So kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. When it comes to syndicating a deal, Mark, you jumped into this from architecture to, syndication and GPing deals and such. When it comes to syndication, what do you think makes a good team, right? A good GP team? What does the team look like? And when is it working really good in your experience?
Yeah, there's actually a classic structure to private equity firms. There's sort of the analyst, big picture kind of thinker, and then there's the operations side. So those are the two base components. But as you build a bigger and bigger operation, you adopt more and more people filling specific roles within the operation. So, if you just got 2 people working on a deal, you all have to go out and raise money. You have to manage the asset once you have it under contract. You have to do all the books and records. You have to do the legal every year, the accounting every year. So as your operation grows, you can hire specialists within each of those roles. I know Josh now has 2 people who are full-time acquisitions folks, where all they're doing is dialing for dollars all day long, and finding off-market deals. My role within this partnership is, you can think a guy with my skill sets would be out in the field directing traffic. I don't do that much anymore. I'm almost full-time exclusively raising capital because I have a really good rapport with people, and I am, they take me seriously because of my background. I have some cred. So, I'm constantly, having phone calls, having meetings, trying to raise, millions of dollars of equity on behalf of this partnership. So, it starts, fairly basic, but then it can grow pretty expansively from there. There's a lot, as Josh said, there are a lot of moving parts. Someone has to be the quarterback, but it is really difficult in my experience for any one person to wear all those hats.
Yeah. Josh, so, you've got 2 full-time acquisition people on your team. What's some tips that you've found? You might not want to give us, the full secret sauce here, but what are some tips you found for finding good deals, finding off-market deals, or finding deals that make sense financially in a world where this real estate, is going crazy, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think one of the biggest things is, be intentional about, if you're talking to brokers to find a deal, like don't waste their time. That's the worst thing that could happen to any broker is you say, oh, you send me a deal. I like this area, whatever. And let's say they do send you a good deal and you drag your feet, or you take too long, or you make up reasons why you don't want to do the deal. That's the biggest way to get blackballed. Because again, finding the deal that's the tip of the spear. That's the first thing you have to do. So, you've got to be intentional. So basically have your plan thought out. If you find something that fits your metrics, don't be afraid to go after it. Don't waste anybody's time. That's probably the best tip I can give you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can add to that. Number one rule.
Go for it, Mark. Go for it.
Number one rule in this business is don't be an asshole.
I like that rule.
Really. You don't want to waste people's time. You want to get a reputation as a professional. and serious and a closer. And if you can do that and be professional, don't be a jerk, you will, find deals coming your way unexpectedly. It happens to me all the time. I'm asked to co-GP on a lot of deals, and I have to evaluate the people who are bringing that to me, and that's a whole different conversation. But to Josh's point, you don't want to waste brokers' times, because they have a lot of people who they are calling them. And the first 100 things on a broker's to-do list is get the check, get the check, get the check. So if you can close a deal, they'll get a check, right? So just be a good guy to do business with.
Yeah. So I like that rule. Number one rule, don't be an asshole, right? Okay, check.
Yeah,
If you fellow deal makers out there, if we just clear that and we're like, hey, we're all human here, let's try to figure this out together and let's make money doing it. Number one rule, if we all follow that, which said in a different way is the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. Yeah. So Mark, back to you, Mark. When it comes to, since you're out talking to dollars, right? You're the cap guy, the cap raiser. What is some advice you have for, the fellow deal makers on raising capital?
Oh boy. I will tell you, when I figure that out, I'm going to bottle it and sell it. It is legitimately, I think, one of the hardest parts of the business. Just because of our deal velocity, we are constantly in need of dollars. So, when we close a deal, we've put, on the last deal, 15 million in equity into the deal from, a syndication, and then we're teeing up a deal 3 months later. I mean, those investors that invested in the last deal may or may not be able to participate. They may have run out of juice. So now I've got to go out and refresh my investor database, with new investors, and just constantly cycling through all these. I'll tell you, it is a 24/7 game raising money. It is, a lot of it is marketing. I have a lot of resources I utilize. I don't know if I want to fully divulge this on this program, but I have let's just say I use technology substantially in my favor, and I'm able to kind of establish initial, at least, touches with people. But I have found that the best way to do it is just have a conversation with somebody, getting in front of somebody as opposed to just a cold email, builds credibility much faster. I don't think I've ever, off just a cold email to somebody, gotten anybody to invest in my deals. It just doesn't work. So, so the goal is to just be honest with people, present them with an opportunity. If they like it, great. Let's take it to the next level. If not, move on. Don't waste anybody's time, and don't come hat in hand looking needy, because, again, you're an a-hole when you do that. So, so that's that, I spent a lot of time thinking about this particular aspect of the business, and I'm part of a mastermind. That's all we talk about is how to do this. And, doing podcasts like this gets my name out there, blog posting, my website, I use LinkedIn a lot, Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of social media stuff is quite helpful. And we're still exploring all the avenues with that. I have an IT team that does this for me full time. I have a back office team in India that does it for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And so cool. I just had a deal that just came across our decks that I had a sign on. The money is the strangest thing when you're working with investors and working on capital, and you're asking for money, raising capital for deals, and like the way it comes, sometimes it surprises you. Tell me a story, either one of you, tell me a story where money came in a unique way.
I got a great story.
All right, Mark, you go first.
Mark, you go first.
You know the one I'm going to tell, don't you, Josh?
No, I do know.
Yeah, so I get body work done because I sit in front of a computer, and I'm an old fart, and my neck's all torn up, so I have to get body work done. And I was lying on a table getting some very deep tissue massage done, and while I'm on the table, my phone is just blowing up. I was like, what is going on? And so I finally get off the table, I get in the car. I've got 3 texts, 2 emails, and a voicemail from this one guy. And I was like, okay. And I finally figured out, kind of how I got in touch with him. I've been communicating with one of his direct reports for a couple of years and trying to get him to invest in our deals. And he's a little bit off his ability to do that. He's kind of rebuilding his life a little bit. But he told his boss about me. And it turns out this guy works literally right down the street from Josh, like 2 blocks away. Talked to him, and in 3 minutes, the guy invested $1 million in our last deal.
That's that crazy, right?
And I had never talked to this guy before. And, he's blowing up my phone, desperate to get into this deal. It was the last deal we did. So I went down and met with Josh, really smart guy. I mean, I can keep up with just about anybody, but he was moving pretty quick. Yeah. So
Mark, what that shows me is you need to go get more massages, because money just shows up when.
Well, what it really shows is you just don't know where the money is going to come from. So I have adopted this, attitude of abundance. I'll talk to anybody. I'll make time for anybody to talk to them. And it's just conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. And I enjoy talking to people. It's always interesting. So I met this direct report for coffee the last time I was down in Houston. It's the first time I met him. And next thing you know, his boss is deploying $1 million our way, and he's going to do that on multiple deals going forward.
Very cool. Very cool. Josh, do you have a different story?
I do. I'm not sure if it's as elaborate as Mark's, but there was a time where it was a new introduction. A lot of our equity comes through referrals. The more you perform, the more you're able to show a track record. It naturally is going to get people talking, right? So we had a guy who basically had some trust fund money. He was successful on his own, but he also had some trust fund money. And he was a new investor, so we met him at the office, sat down, did the whole coffee thing, and he was definitely interested, but he's like, I think I'm going to go small on this one. He's like, I'm not sure what I want. And one piece of advice I'll give your audience is never try to go for the home run. If you're raising money, don't be like, hey, if you can do $500,000, give me $500,000. Yeah, we need that. Like, you always want to give people, especially new investors, the option to come in small and test the waters, because they're testing you out as much as you are them. And I never want to put pressure on somebody to have to write a check that they don't feel comfortable writing. It's not good for anybody. So I said, our minimum's 50,000 on this deal. You're more than welcome to come through that. If you want to come bigger the next time, it's totally fine. You can get to see how we work and communicate and all that. He winds up writing a check for $500,000.
Yeah. Wow.
Just wasn't expecting it at all. It wasn't even part of the big part of the raise. So
yeah, that was a good coffee. That was a good coffee meeting, wasn't it?
It was worth every penny of the drink.
Now, Josh, I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and towards the bottom, it looks like you're an expert in coffee. You're a coffee barista, at your local church.
Oh, that was years ago. That was actually a volunteer thing I did. My church.
Awesome. But you're also a bass player. It says that do you still play bass?
I do occasionally. I've been in a few bands over the years. I'm still trying to get the Houston band together.
Oh, what kind of music do you play? What kind of music do you play?
Oh, weird stuff all over the place. Rock to a little bit of jazz and some kind of fusion stuff in between. So
yeah. Are you a virtuoso where you can play both sides and flip the bass and play left or right?
I can't quite do that. I tried using my foot one time and it didn't work out too well. So.
Mark, what about you? What kind of do you have a hobby or something that you do to kind of, besides getting massages? That's a great hobby, by the way.
Yeah.
But do you have any hobbies that you do when you just raise, let's just say we raised $10 million, we all give each other high fives. Josh goes over, makes coffee and plays bass. What about you, Mark? What are you going to do?
Well, I am a master swimmer for one thing, and so this pandemic's been kind of hard to accommodate my swimming regimen. I need to get a little more serious about it again. But, there's a great, place called Hawaii that is a good place to hang out post-deal closing. So I like to go there. We like the island of Kauai, and we'll hang out there for 10 days, something like that. Just I mean, you get fat, lazy, and stupid in Hawaii pretty damn quick. And so that's a goal of mine, you know? So those two things. And then I have 4 grandkids and a 5th on the way right now. So I spend a lot of time with my family, and having grandkids is, it's unique and it's fun, and I'm glad I can just hand it back when we're done. And, but it does add a wholly different dimension to my life that I lacked 10 years ago. So, it's not all about work for me. So I try to balance it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Mark, right? So you guys went to the same school at different times. You went from architectural to deal maker and, cap raiser. At what point did you and Josh connect on the first deal, or meet each other for the first, the first business swing?
Now, how long ago was that, Josh? About 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Close to it. 3.5 years ago. Yeah.
So I live in Seattle, and a couple of companies here maybe you've heard of: Boeing, Starbucks, Microsoft. New kid on the block is Amazon. And on top of that, every tech company in the world practically is based in Seattle. So Seattle real estate just kind of blew up about 8 years ago, and I found that I could no longer do deals here. It was not only was it not profitable, but there's just too much money, stupid money, chasing too few deals and bidding prices up to astronomical levels. And you're getting 2019 builds from brokers, and they're all whispering in your ear, yeah, but it's a value add. It's like, what do you mean? You can raise the rents. I mean, it's like, come on. First of all, we have soft rent control here, and there's just no meat on the bone. So after seeing that for a few years, I just decided I had to go somewhere else. And I did a thorough analysis of the entire country, of what markets I wanted to pursue. And, you can quickly whittle it down if you're thoughtful about it. And I kind of decided I didn't want to be anywhere on the coast. And if you draw a line straight across the country, you wanted to stay south of it. And so south of the line, I kind of started looking at the largest metropolitan areas because I like large MSAs. And, eventually I just kind of settled it on Houston. And next thing you know, I'm making reconnaissance trips down there and trying to meet people. And on one of those trips, I met Josh. And, we quickly realized what our background and temperaments were. And, we did similarly look at the business in a very similar way. And we had very similar goals about the deep value add, opportunistic value add exercise. And I've just not met anybody else who kind of shared my vision for doing deals that way. And so, it was, a pretty good meeting. And next thing you know, we're doing deals together. So,
yeah.
Awesome. So Josh, this guy comes from, the West Coast. He comes over to the country of Texas, essentially. And he's like, hey, I'm doing some recon for some deals. At what point did you guys start going, hey, let's put some dollars in together, and, let's co-GP this deal, or syndicated deal? Like, how did that look like? What did the first deal look like?
It was pretty much right away, I'd say. I mean, you can tell in this business, it's all relationship based. It sounds cliche, but it's very true. You can tell people who are really sincere and genuine and who are going to make something of themselves in this business versus those who don't. And I could see that in Mark pretty much right away. And, the fact that he already had several of his own projects, and, Seattle told me that he knew how to execute, and when he saw something that he liked, he could go after it. So I would say pretty much that next deal that we had found, like, hey, Mark, how much can you bring in? He's like, oh, I can bring in 2 million or whatever the number was. I don't remember. And we're like, all right, let's do it. And so that's kind of where it all started. And that one was a hit. The next one was a hit, and kept being hit after hit, or like Motown over here.
I'm from Detroit, by the way. So,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it just grew very organically from that first deal all the way to the 7th, 8th one that we've done together now. And I couldn't be happier with having Mark's part of our group and co-GPing on all of our deals. So,
yeah. So guys, in terms of deal making, in teams, right? So I like big deals because it brings a team together. And, syndication's fun because you're bringing a lot of different teams, a lot of different focus, specialties come into play, right? So like I'm a team player guy. So the question is twofold for each of you. What is your superpower? And then what is the other person's superpower on this panel? So Mark, we're going to start with you. Mark, what is your superpower? And then what is your perceived view of what Josh's superpower is? You go first, Mark.
Yeah. Wow. Well, in our partnership, I think my superpower is that I'm older, and I have a long career history with a lot of credibility, and that comes in really handy as I talk to people, and because there's no BS. I don't need to kind of, what is it? What's the saying where you pretend until you can fake it
until you make it?
Yeah, I don't need to do that. I don't feel that way at all. I mean, and I am sort of a nice Midwestern guy, so I just sort of have a pretty natural way of trying to converse with people without bloviating or anything like that. And I also am very intentional about keeping my ego tucked in my back pocket. I just, that's kind of a thing with me. Not so obvious superpower is that I'm a profound introvert, and I, view the world very differently than the extroverts in the crowd. And so it makes it easier for me. I've been able to analyze that and work with myself over the years to, develop a rapport that is a little bit different than sort of the extrovert and what I perceive to be the salesman type of role. And so believe me, I use that in my business all day long. And I have serviced clients for 30 years. I've been a high-end custom residential guy for a long, long time. And so you're dealing with people at their most profound level, housing, shelter. And I will tell you, they get kind of crazy when you're dealing with shelter. They do. And there's a lot of emotion around it. So I've had to disarm a lot of, pretty intense conversations in my conference room. And I got pretty good at it. And so I just have used that same skill set in the capital raising side of things. So that's my, I have other superpowers. I don't need to, I think that's my best superpower in this relationship. Josh's, we've never talked about this, so we're going to lay the cards on the table. I think Josh's superpower is he's always, there are a lot of, big egos in this industry, and there's a lot of cowboy attitude, and Josh doesn't have any of that. He is always open to my input, and I appreciate that he takes it, and we have a lot of really pretty intense, I wouldn't call them intense, but very detailed conversations. We're both basically engineers, and so we can get in the weeds pretty quick and stay there. But he never once has ever, dissed on me or anything not to my face anyways, but
I'll find out in a minute.
Yeah. But he's always been quite receptive of anything I've ever had to say. And, I'm coming in from the outside trying to co-GP on these deals. And I've always appreciated that about him. He's just always very receptive to anything I have to say. I do feel like I have a lot to offer. And his willingness to kind of listen to me, I think is the thing I appreciate about him most. So.
All
right, Josh, it's your turn, buddy. What's your superpower? And then what is Mark's?
Yeah, I would say, this business is really tough. It's not, you see all these infomercials and, a lot of podcasts trying to get people in, and it's just not that easy. It's a very difficult business, very cutthroat. And so I've really had to kind of fall back on my resilience to keep going and keep pushing forward. We've had a lot of fallbacks, and a lot of things didn't work out the way we thought, and had to go back, rework the problem and get it right and keep moving forward. So I think, that for me is one of the biggest things that kept us growing and moving and getting to the level where we are, and to continue growing and moving. And, so having that resilience and being able to bounce back, super important. Yep. And then, I would say for Mark, I don't know if I can top compliment he gave me. I would say Mark's is, every time that we have a deal, then we're talking about on the phone or email or whatever, he always can find something that I didn't think about. Very analytical. Analytics is probably the biggest strong suit he has. But there's always something that he can bring to the table as far as, hey, do you think about that? Or what about this? Or what if we try to tweak that? So it's analytics with kind of a creative out of the box mentality that Mark has. And it really brings some fresh perspective a lot of times to the deals that we're looking at. The industry can be a little stodgy. A lot of people like to do the same thing the same way all the time. Mark's not like that. He likes to say, hey, how can we do it different? Can we do it better? How can we innovate on it? So I really do. I think Mark brings that fresh perspective and a very analytical mind.
Yeah.
Very cool. Hey, so, with deal making and syndication, I got a little bit of a feedback. Was that my mic? It might've been my mic. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So with deal making, as a whole, and especially in like syndication, right? Deals sometimes go wild. I'm going to give you, one of you guys get to, answer this question. When deals go wild, you guys are partners, right? Like you co-GP things. So like you're part of the team, right? When deals gone wild, what is some advice on how to approach it as a team? So one of you guys gets to go for it. Who wants it?
Why don't you take it, Josh?
All right. Well, deals can go wild for a million different reasons. When they do, I think calm heads prevail. That's always the mantra I like to live by. The minute you start freaking out, panicking, you can't really solve a problem that way. I mean, no great general that's ever won a war is going to tell you, hey, let's freak out and not solve. It just doesn't work, right? So you gotta remain level-headed and calm, and then work the problem as a team. I think that, especially when it comes to, most of the times that these deals kind of get a little hairy is usually in the first 3 months when you're raising the money, you're getting the contracts together, you're doing all of your due diligence. That's when things can really get a little hairy, but you just got to remain calm and, kind of just work the problem as a team is probably the best thing I could say.
Awesome. All right. So as we go towards the end of this interview, I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire back and forth. All right. So let's start with Mark. Mark, if you had to point me to a resource, right? Book, podcast, training guide, or something like that on how to either raise capital, be a better deal maker, or do, this kind of work, what recommendation do you have?
No, a couple of things. First of all, I am a real big fan of Hunter Thompson, if you know who he is.
Yeah.
I think he's written probably the best book about capital raising for real estate that I've ever read, and I've read a lot. So, I keep going back and rereading that. I'm a part of his mastermind. I get something out of that every day. It is really sort of taken my understanding of capital raising up about 3 levels, and I hope it takes it up another 3 from here. So there's that. And then you can't do this business unless you know how to underwrite. You just can't. And there are a lot of people who, I don't know how they do it, but they kind of do it on a hope and a prayer, and belt and suspenders and gut level. I don't know what, but this is a math problem. This whole business is a math problem. And if you don't know how to dance around in Excel, much less understand kind of how the numbers work in real estate, you need to learn. And there are a lot of courses out there. I usually, if people are really serious about real estate, I'll direct them to Cornell's Master of Science in Real Estate program. You can do it online. You get a sort of entry-level Ivy League education, and it's a great overview of the industry. And a couple of the courses in it are about underwriting. You just have to know how to underwrite. And Josh and I talk about underwriting all the time, the nuances of it, and kind of, did you look at this, and did we consider this, and this sort of macro level thing, how is it impacting us on a micro level? And there's a lot to it. It takes years of practice to learn how to underwrite a deal correctly, and even then it can be garbage in, garbage out. So those are the 2 big things I think I would comment on.
Very cool. Yeah, Hunter wrote a great book on raising capital. He's a cap raiser. He's done a lot of stuff in it. So great recommendation right there, Mark. Josh, question to you, right? So kind of twofold question. Being the Texan, having 300 assets under management. You mentioned, Mark said you have a great ability to kind of tuck ego in back pocket and just come at this with humility. Why is that important in deal making? And then how do you practice that? What's a way that I can grow in that aspect?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think I thought you were going to ask me the book question because I'd have a good book lined up. So I try to read, the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I read it once a year because I always learn something new when I read that book. The book's been around for 60, 80 years, whatever. But there's always something, and what I always get out of it, the same theme I always get is that, how you treat people and how you rapport you can build with people is more important than how smart you are, how intelligent you are. Yeah. And that goes all the way to ego too. I mean, if you come in the room and let's say I'm trying to convince somebody to invest in my deal and I say, oh, we're so great, we're this, we're that. It doesn't really work usually a lot. I think, humility really goes a long way because people want to know that people just don't like a big head. I mean, they just don't like it. It's, it just really, people want to know that, yes, okay, you've done well, you've got a good track record, but I'm going to trust you with this money. How do I know that you're not just blowing smoke and kind of getting all hot-headed because you're so big on yourself? I just haven't found in general that having an ego does really anything for me or for somebody I'm trying to influence, and especially not with capital raising. I just don't think that people are attracted to that. So,
yeah, very good. So, Josh, here's a question for you. What question do you wish someone would ask you, right? Like it could be personal, it could be life, it could be business. Like what's a question that you wish someone would ask you?
Like in a business sense or just it could be anything?
Yeah, we're having coffee and you're like, man, I hope Josh asked me this question. And then I do. And you're like, yes, I get to talk about it. What is that?
Why do you love music so much?
Why do you love music so much, Josh?
Because it just, for whatever reason, music just resets me. It puts me in a place where I can let go of anything that's going on in my head. And it sometimes will help me be creative too. I can think of whether it's a lyric in a song or a melody, sometimes it helps. It gets the brain juices flowing in ways that just sitting in silence can't do. I can't explain it. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, very cool. Mark, let me ask you a question, right? So you studied, you had a minor in historic architecture, right? So you and I bought you a brand new DSLR camera and you and I are going to go look at some buildings, any part of the world to look at your famous architecture, like structures and such. What are we going to go take some pictures of? What's your famous?
First, we're going to fly to Paris. And there's this area around Paris called the Ile-de-France. And, it's back in the Middle Ages when all the Gothic cathedrals were being thrown up. There's several right within that area. I would just make a tour of, Parisian architecture. There's a little known book that an architect put together about 20 years ago. He did 300 structures, 300 of his favorite structures in Paris. I still have it. It's on my bookshelf. I'm looking right at it. He hand sketched the facade of each building, and then he did a historical kind of biography of each building.
Wow.
Very cool book. I'd take that with me, and I would just kind of spend 3 weeks running around Paris. And then from there, I'd take the train down to Florence. And I would, that's the birthplace of the Renaissance. And I could spend 3 months there and never get bored, so a lot of really interesting architecture there, and you got the Uffizi Gallery there, you got the Louvre in Paris. And I spent a lot of times I have spent thousands of hours over the years in art galleries. It's kind of a hobby of mine. I just love going to art galleries and looking at art. So I'd be in heaven and I'd just be left alone with coffee and, focaccia, and I'd be pretty happy. I'd get fat, but
Well, then you don't swim as well. You just more bob across the water.
Yeah, something like that.
So Josh, last question for you. Where could people go connect with you and do a deal with you?
Yeah, so our website, it's 3pillarscapitalgroup.com. 3 is spelled out. And then, my email is joshw@3pillarscapitalgroup.com.
Very cool. Mark, where could people go connect with you and do a deal with you?
My website is SGRE for Schuler Group Real Equity Investments, plural.com. And it's just market SGREinvestments.com.
Very cool. Fellow deal makers listening into this interview, this panel discussion talking about GPing deals in multifamily. I hope this was entertaining, educational, and inspirational. My ask to you is that you reach out to our guests, connect with them, right? And say, thanks for being on the show, and find a way to do a deal with our ecosystem here, right? Like that's the mission of the show, is to put people in deals together. So head on over to their contact information, which will be in the show notes. And as always, if you're working on a deal or looking for a deal, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.